quiet on set.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve Smith.
Hey, Bret Starr.
How you doing today, man?
Doing good. Doing really good.
It's a almost cold day today in Fort Worth. It was 41 degrees this morning.
It was below freezing here in St. Louis, Missouri, by the mighty Mississippi River. So, fall has fallen here.
I always, always feel bad when I talk about, it getting cold in Fort Worth to people who live like in Canada or in the Midwest or something like that.
Yeah.
But, we had that terrible ice storm in Texas, and
the one that took down the power grid.
Yeah, it was so bad. It was so bad that I had to go on LinkedIn to get a message out to clients saying, basically hell is frozen over in Fort Worth. Don't expect to hear from anybody. Nothing's working. Flashlights are suspended in Kelvin conditions. And I started to get all this shit on LinkedIn from people who are like, oh, y'all don't know what winter's like, and, until you live, in negative 30 degrees or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but you don't get it. We don't have the infrastructure for all that.
Right.
I used to live in Boston. You get a 20-inch snow, and it would be cleared the next day.
Yeah.
We don't have enough stuff to clear, a 6-inch snow.
Yeah.
Our pipes aren't insulated. Even apparently our windmills that produce, power are not insulated. And so my retort was, well, come down to Fort Worth and live through, 60 consecutive days of 115-degree weather.
Yeah, I had a friend back when I was doing HR communications consulting. He was a HR director at an oil company in Dallas, and we were having lunch one day, and he said, yeah, I grew up in Illinois, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to get down to Texas, and I'm going to show them how to drive on ice. And he's just like, nope. He's just like, the infrastructure just isn't there. They don't know. They do not know how to get ice and snow off the roads, and it's just a treacherous automotive hellscape.
Dude, when we first moved here from Boston, still have Boston plates, all that stuff. It froze one day, and we were going to try to drive to Hobby Lobby or something because we needed something on some project we were working on in the house, right? Mm-hmm. And it was, we knew it was frozen over, but we're like, hey, we're from Boston. And so I get up on this, the bridge that goes over, I think it's 183 as you kind of, get on the highway.
Yeah.
And it was filled with cars just crashed to the side. And not one of them had a Texas license plate. It was all people like me who figured they'd moved from cold places and knew how to drive and, on ice and snow, and you just can't do it.
Well, it's real different. Even in St. Louis, they know how to get ice and snow off the roads. They treat the roads. They've got, it's just like, a couple of hours after a big snow or ice storm, it's just like you can get on the main thoroughfare as the highway, and it's pretty clear. So,
well, we've got a lot to talk about today. I personally, of course, would love to spend time in the Metaverse. And when you talk about the Metaverse, you have to talk about Facebook/Meta. Mm-hmm. Although I don't know if there's a slash anymore. I still see Facebook everywhere.
What was your take on the rebrand?
Well, somebody wrote me an article or an email a couple of weeks ago when they were first announcing that it was going to happen, and my response was, well, this is going to go well, because it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
When a big brand rebrands like that, all the haters are going to come out, and they're just going to hate. And there's a lot to hate about Facebook, right?
Yeah.
And, I personally don't think that their rebrand was, specifically aimed at a PR fix, because you and I both know a rebrand like that takes a long time.
Yeah.
And, the tension that was developing around, everything that's going on with Facebook has really intensified recently, but they probably were working on that, kind of rebrand for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And so I think they're getting a lot of, hate about the rebrand because it's being tied to a PR stunt. But, rebrands never, show well in the first, 2 or 3 months. And then after that, I think the success or failure of the brand really starts to show through. I personally believe that it will be an extremely successful rebrand. I also personally believe that Facebook is moving more into the business to business space than they are business to consumer space.
Yeah.
And hopefully that leads to, you know, the evil part of Facebook that we all hate, like dying off eventually, and, you know, some real value being created in the world. But that was a long answer to a short question. What do you think?
No, I mean, I think you're right about, I mean, rebrands always, you know, right out of the gate, you know, the clients want everything to be embraced and loved, but it's easy. I mean, it just draws out the trolls and the snarky comments, and, you know, it's easy to kind of overreact in the near term. But what we've seen over and over again is in the long term, the real meaning in a brand comes out as the brand just lives it.
Yeah, the experiences.
Right. I think what's interesting specifically to a brand like Facebook and now Meta is when you look at the transition that Google went through to Alphabet. It's just like, yeah, Alphabet's the parent company, but, you know, everyone still calls them Google. No one. The only time they ever really talk about Alphabet is when it's an investment or there's a regulatory issue. It really is not. It's not so much a brand that's alive in the market consciousness, really.
Yeah, but I mean, even like to your point, I mean, look at the, you know, when Starbucks just changed their logo a little bit by exploding it, you know, it's like the world freaked out. The world freaked out. When American Airlines just changed their like eagle logo a little bit, you know, the world freaked out. And it really comes back to the experiences that people have afterwards that define. I mean, I can't. I'm sure that there's examples, and we're always supposed to know this as people who like, you know, run agencies. An example of the rebrand that sank a company and stuff like that, but it's never a rebrand that sinks the company. You know, it's the experiences that people have with the company before, during, and after a rebrand that make all the difference.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about, you know, I'd like to, you know, kind of spend a little time in the metaverse, and that's naturally going to, you know, bring up a conversation about Facebook, but also Microsoft is a part of that conversation.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was just having a conversation in a meeting. I went to a real meeting in a different city and sat in a conference room, and it was great. But it was also very strange. It was very strange. And that's just a side point. You know, just to be in a room with people and like go out to dinner and stuff. I mean, I haven't done that in like 2 years. But I was talking a little bit at one point about how the employee experience market is strange because people are entering from the top and the bottom. So usually when you see a platform develop in a market, it's, you know, bottom up from categories, and then the big companies will come in and buy their way in to that innovation. But you've got companies like, you know, Microsoft and Workday and, you know, Oracle with Journeys entering from the top of the market down. And then you have all of these, you know, category players going from the top up. And I just kind of, you know, casually mentioned, oh, yeah, you should probably put Facebook in that list because the metaverse is a serious thing, and Facebook has a head start on everybody. But then you showed me all that information about Microsoft and what they've been doing in the metaverse. And it's not a one-horse race. And so, you know, the last time, you know, you and I talked, hold on, I gotta get this real quick. The last, I went off set for a moment.
That's okay. We'll fix it in post.
Yeah, we'll fix it in post. The last time that you and I talked about the metaverse, you were dubious.
Still am.
Still am.
Love to talk about that.
And I was going to get my goggles out. So you wouldn't want to wear a set of these goggles for any part of your work day.
For work? Hell no.
And tell me why you're dubious of the metaverse, just generally speaking, from the consumer experience that you think you might have of wearing a headset to what gets done.
You know, it's not even the consumer experience. I think that what I'm troubled by, and this isn't exclusive to Facebook, we're definitely seeing it happen with Microsoft, and I think we're going to see it happen across the board with the work tech brands that are trying to own this entire employee experience space, is the data aggregation and sort of the nanny tech that comes along with it. You know, when you think about even like conversational UIs, you know, like everybody's got an Alexa or a Siri or a Hey Google, and just like, what's happening to that data? You know, that's going into a large database somewhere that is synthesizing and aggregating and learning things that maybe you wouldn't want, you know, aggregated about you. And I think the same thing is, there's a potential for that in the metaverse, where it's just like something that's all encompassing, and all of your actions, all of your words are going into a massive database somewhere. And how is that data being used? And I don't think that what are an employee's rights in the digital workplace? And that is, I mean, hasn't been defined at all, and it is a wide open territory. And my concern is that technology is moving faster than our ability to manage the consequences of that technology.
You know, it's so funny you should say that. So I think the first time that, like, you know, the notion of like owning your own data and stuff like that kind of entered the public consciousness on a small level is when Andrew Yang was running for president. Remember the Yang Gang?
Yeah, Yang Gang.
And he had two things that just really, you know, fired people up, either really for him or against him. One was Yang Bucks, which was just cutting people, you know, a few $1,000s check a month. And it was basically a, you know, a branded version of universal basic income.
Right.
But the other was data ownership. He felt very strongly that people should, he said something like, you know, data is the, you know, fossil fuel of the 21st century. And people should own their own data, and if they want to release it so that people can market to them and use it for, you know, whatever, they should get paid for it. And I think that was the first time that people who are not in the tech industry were really talking about like the ethics of data and stuff like that. And I found that very interesting. But another thing, I was reading, rereading A World Without Email by Cal Newport. As you know, we at the Star Conspiracy are trying to figure out how to balance deep collaboration with deep work, and you know, still create moments of rest and all that stuff. And a lot of it comes down to, you know, constant interruptions from communications channels, and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the notions that that is inserted in that book, and it's almost kind of a throwaway, is this notion of technological determinism. Have you ever heard of this? So that, like, basically, I mean, he makes a great case based on someone else's great case that feudalism, the form of government of feudalism, was started by the technology innovation of the stirrup. And that the stirrup basically, hi, doggy.
Yeah, my dog Mario's here. Sorry, go ahead. You're talking about stirrups.
Yeah, it must have got Mario excited. He was like, it's more about the horses.
Yeah, he heard that. He's actually got a little cable knit turtleneck sweater, so he's dressed like a creative writing adjunct professor at a small liberal arts college.
That's awesome.
So,
well, Constantinople's grandfather seized all church lands, and that was the start of feudalism. And the reason that he seized all church lands was so that he could basically have a mounted cavalry to protect the borders of their empire. And, you know, people kind of went back and forth about, you know, well, why, you know, it was creating fiefdoms. It was creating a form of government that hadn't existed before. But back then, you know, the currency was land. And if you were going to raise a cavalry, you needed land, you needed, you know, space for, you know, grazing, you needed stables, you needed all that stuff. But the real breakthrough was the stirrup, because for the first time, you know, a knight in shining armor sitting on a horse who was leaning forward in his stirrups was combining the power of the horse with the, you know, the velocity of the horse with the power of, you know, their arm and shoulder and all that stuff. So it was a force multiplier. It was like a shock weapon. It was like, you know, a shock weapon. And that allowed, you know, a major military advantage over time. But, you know, the point was the stirrup was not created to be, the, the atomic bomb of, and the stirrup was not created to throw off a form of government. It was created as an innovation for, more comfort in writing, but it had all of these unintended consequences. Mm-hmm. And so the field of technological determinism is about the unintended consequences mm-hmm. of technology innovations, and how like the technology, without making it sound like, it's a sentient being or whatever, the technology has goals of its own. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of like we used to say, like, be careful what software you buy because it's going to, have an impact on your culture.
Right.
And so, like email was created as a efficient form of asynchronous communication, right? Mm-hmm. But look at all the unintended consequences of, everybody adopting, email over time. And so a lot of this data stuff and a lot of the metaverse stuff and, et cetera, there's going to be some, unintended consequences to it all that we can't anticipate. And this may be a watershed moment, much like email was, much like, the fax machine was, much like whatever, but we just don't know, right? We just don't know. And I'm curious because the data part really freaks you out. I wonder how much of that is a generational thing and how much of that is also just like the new technology thing, right? Because isn't Amazon already doing this? Isn't Apple already doing this? I mean, how do you perceive like the metaverse is different in terms of how it utilizes your data or what the risk is?
Well, I think that, a big part of how it's different is this is how you spend, a third or more of your life, and half or more of your waking life is at work. And in a lot of places, the how you work, where you work, what you work with is not within your power and purview. And, at least in the workplace, there are a lot of rights that, at least like in the United States, you have as an individual outside of the workplace that don't apply when you're inside the workplace. Like, vaccinations, am I able to say, do I get a vaccination or not? Or free speech, am I allowed to talk about whatever? Well, it's just like employers have a great deal of latitude over that. Well, when you think about when that kind of gets into the metaverse, it's just like, yeah, of course I'm going to aggregate your data because I want to understand who my most productive employees are. What are they doing differently? And there's potentially some good things to come out of that, but there's also a lot of really bad things that could come out of that. And I just don't think that, I think that there are more unintended consequences than, I think that technology is moving faster than the regard to the consequences.
Yeah, I agree. At the same time, we've been advancing our tests internally on, trying different things in the metaverse. And there's a lot of positive stuff that we're seeing about it. And of course, I think when Facebook came out and announced a bunch of the changes that they're going through, one of them was that the metaverse is going to be you no longer need a Facebook account basically to use an Oculus Quest 2. Mm-hmm. That doesn't make their entire data collection apparatus disappear, but I think in the minds of a lot of people it does.
Right.
But I don't know. It's like what overall is going to be the social good created versus the potential social bad.
Well, I think to kind of bring this back to brand, when you start thinking about another announcement that Facebook came out with was all about the facial recognition that they had been aggregating. They're like, yeah, we're shutting that down. We're deleting all that data. I don't believe for one fucking second they're deleting all that data. And I don't believe that they're going to stop aggregating that. Why do I feel that way? It's because of the brand perception around the Facebook brand, that it's gone over the past 5 or 6 years from a very highly regarded brand to one that is regarded with a lot of skepticism and mistrust. And once that slide begins, it's very hard to fix that from a brand perspective. You're seeing that out right now with like Southwest Airlines, what has gone from a very highly regarded brand to one that has lost a lot of trust. And I think that from a work tech brand standpoint, just the whole idea of what do you stand for in terms of, things like data privacy that seem really like arcane and bureaucratic, but are increasingly having a lot of relevance in the broader conversation. And what is the impact of your product roadmap on your brand?
So if I understand, and by the way, the same thing just happened to American Airlines. They had to cancel 3,000 flights or whatever over a weekend. And, no one trusts the reasons that they give you. Oh, there was bad weather in Texas, and that delayed everything, because the wind was like 60 miles per hour. And oh yeah, we might have a staffing issue. And oh yeah, but don't worry, we're hiring 9,000 more pilots. It's like, where the hell are they getting these pilots? It's like, well, you can just decide to go hire 9,000 pilots. Like, you couldn't have done that before. So it kind of makes me worry about who these pilots are. It's like, did they learn on like the Microsoft simulator, or like, I don't know. But it sounds to me like what you're saying, that if a company has a dark soul, apparently a rebrand can't fix that.
It's specific to Facebook. I don't think that. No, I don't think that whether you call it Facebook or Meta, I don't think that that's in the near term going to change everything. But kind of back to the original point is, you can't judge a rebrand based on what happens the first week. It's what's that brand going to mean and stand for, 3 years from now, 10 years from now, and there's no way of knowing.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't make the whistleblower go away. It doesn't make the false testimony in front of Congress go away. It doesn't make the newly revealed practices of where, data was managed and wasn't managed, and, where speech was moderated and not moderated, and, different countries around the world and stuff like that. And, a lot of that stuff flows from, purpose and vision and culture inside an organization. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes a brand, a rebrand does go deep into, that part of it. It acknowledges that there are things. I mean, we used to joke about a long time ago that, like, when we were going to meet a new company, I would always read their, kind of core values, because everybody had their core values on their, website. And I was always like, this is just a list of things they screwed up over the years. Like, if you have to put, as one of your like core values, we're ethical, that's a real red flag. And people have kind of gotten away from, that sort of, outward communication of like, vision and, culture and stuff like that. But it's interesting. But, I think that, as you would say, the horse is out of the barn. Is that what you say? The horse is out of the barn? The horse is out of the barn on the Metaverse, because tell me about Microsoft. Tell me about all the stuff that you sent over about Microsoft. Yeah, I mean, it's just like this week they had a whole spate of announcements, and it was basically like, oh, Metaverse? You want a Metaverse? We got one of those. And, obviously this isn't something that they just cooked up in the last, 2 weeks. It's, as with everything with Microsoft, it is, a slow build. It seems to move at a glacial pace. But, if you kind of look at everything that's going on with Microsoft, it seems, I mean, they are full on a workplace technology brand now. I mean, and they're advancing on all fronts. You see, like, the announcement of their freelance marketplace. So they're going straight up against, Fiverr and Upwork. Yeah. LinkedIn Learning is becoming a monolith. They've got Viva. Now they have kind of the metaverse and building a lot of this stuff into Microsoft Teams and the broader ecosystem. And, it's been a long time coming, but you can see the momentum begin to build. Yeah, and it's interesting because you pointed out in one of the articles that you sent over that they've been working on the Metaverse stuff specifically for a long time through Mesh, and Mesh has been around for a while. What I found really interesting in that article was that Mesh was not really a Metaverse project per se. It was more of a project to bring together all of the different operating systems and platforms in Microsoft, so that they could basically all be unified. Mm-hmm. And then the Metaverse just became another layer that was on top of that. But they've got headsets. Yeah. I was just while we were talking, I clicked over on a couple of links in another article that you sent over, and it was Fast Company. And, the article basically asks the question, why, and this was years ago, why is Microsoft getting into the metaverse? And the headline is more equitable meetings for one, like that, like more equitable meetings for one was like the lead on why they were getting into the metaverse. And so I don't think this is like when Microsoft Viva came out, a lot of people thought it was just a marketing announcement to try to take advantage of, some, growing interest in employee experience based on the pandemic and all that. But it's clear that that's a real product, that there's a lot of strategy behind it, and they've been working on it for a long time. You seem dubious when I said that. Do you not agree with that?
No, I agree with that. I think that, it's clearly, this is something that's been happening behind the scenes for years. And it's, as dubious as I am, I also realize that everything is moving in this direction. And when you talk about like equity in meetings, it's just like anybody who's ever joined a conference call from a noisy airport and tried to follow along with the conversation and participate knows how inequitable meetings have been from are you in the office, are you not in the office?
Yeah.
Are you in the office, are you remote full time? And so, that's a very real thing.
I just had that experience. I was driving down to Austin for that meeting, and I called into our senior leadership team meeting for the first time in probably 2 years, like just from a phone, and everyone else was on video. Mm-hmm. And it was a terrible, lonely experience for me. Yeah. I couldn't see anyone's face.
Yeah.
I didn't know how what I was saying was landing. I wasn't getting any nonverbal cues. Mm-hmm. It was a great meeting in terms of what we achieved and what we talked about and all that stuff. But I'm also glad it happened because it reminded me of why we've made a lot of the decisions that we made to be digital by default or whatever you want to call it. And the amount of inclusivity that that has brought to our our own meeting culture and everything. Yeah. So I'm glad I had that experience because it reminded me a lot of that stuff. But it is very difficult if you're an outlier, a far ender, and you're not participating in the same way that other people are.
Yeah.
So I give you shit about the metaverse because,
and you should.
Well, I don't, because I want to backtrack a little bit because, I know that it's not that you believe it's not going to happen.
Right.
It's that you believe that there are significant issues associated with it and big questions that have yet to be answered, and that the unintended consequences have the potential to be at a larger scale than things that we've seen before. Mm-hmm. And you would like to see more of those questions answered and more of a, kind of responsible approach and transparency around, specifically data, but, some other things about that.
And it's not so much that I would like to see it. I just know that it is not going to happen.
Yeah.
That, there's really within kind of workplace technology, there's two significant developments going on at the same time. You have what is happening with office workers who are now in hybrid distributed work environments, and how are we going to replicate what the in-person, in-office experience is like, knowing that we're never going back to 2019. 2019, it might as well be, 1959. It's just not going to happen. This is going to be the reality for office work and knowledge work. And the driver of that is going to be people voting with their feet. Hey, I don't want to have to go in the office every day. I'm going to go find a job that lets me work remote. And there's certainly going to be plenty of that. So that's one development, what's happening there. The other development is what's happening in low-skill jobs that can be automated. And I think that we're seeing restaurants and service workers just aren't available. and companies, restaurants are shutting down. Service employers are they're going out of business because they cannot find employees. And I think that what's going to end up happening is you're going to see at the supermarket, great, you already can go and do the automated checkout. Well, I mean, look at what's going on with Amazon. You can go to a store at the airport and just walk in, get what you need, and walk out, and it just automatically charges your Amazon Prime account. I think that we're going to move to all manner of automation, from retail to burger flipping to truck driving and warehousing and logistics and supply chain, and all of that's going to be automated faster than anyone realized. I think that the 2030 workplace is going to look dramatically different across the board from the 2020 workplace. And it's on all fronts, it's moving faster than I think that anyone is prepared to admit or realize at this point.
Yeah, and look at the price of bacon. You bought any bacon lately?
No, I haven't.
Dude, like a thing of bacon's like $15 now.
Really?
Yeah, it's like gone up like threefold in price. And there's a serious side to that, which is the supply chain side, right? Like, the supply chain is, under a lot of pressure. But also, I think everyone is quick to say, oh, well, the supply chain problems are caused almost exclusively by, pandemic issues. And I don't think that's true. I think that there are, like all these other societal shifts that are occurring that, make the way the supply chain is set up right now not as decentralized as it needs to be in order to meet the growing decentralization of everything that's happening across all the dimensions of our lives.
Well, and I think that when you look at, I was reading an article just this morning with an interview with, and you're going to say, boy, you have a really boring start to your day, Steve. It was an interview with the CEO of one of the largest fertilizer companies in Europe. And
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's basically the price of fertilizer has tripled because it relies largely on natural gas to produce the ammonium to make the fertilizer. And so the price of fertilizer has gone from $100 a ton to $1,000 a ton, or something along those lines. And what's going to end up happening is it's going to create real food shortages because people who are dependent on both the fertilizer to grow food, but then also the supply chain to get food to market, they're just getting bombarded on all sides by increasing costs, and they're not going to be able to keep up. So, it's just like food shortages. Who would have thought? What kind of wicked medieval world are we living in?
Yeah, we're going back to the feudal system.
I know.
We need a new stirrup.
Yeah, we need a new stirrup.
Didn't that fertilizer plant have to shut down because of the cost dynamics? Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And, I'll take the future a little bit further. People are already 3D printing food. Did you know that? You can 3D print like a burger patty. It's not like meat, it's like this.
Can you 3D print chicken wings?
Not yet.
And if you can, do they come with Frank's Red Hot or not?
It's basically they took an easy bake oven and they put a Dremel 3D printer in it. So it prints and cooks. And
that sounds really cool.
It does. It sounds awesome. I think they're like $780,000.
Well, in Austin, they're printing houses now.
Yeah, I saw that. Oh, man, Austin has changed so much even in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Just in the last 2 years, it's changed so much. But, I wanted to, spend some time talking about the Metaverse and Facebook and, Microsoft and, how all of that stuff is kind of moving in the direction of B2B and work tech, et cetera. There was a pretty big funding announcement of ClickUp, and we can talk a little bit about them because this, to me, is, kind of a hallmark of where we are and a harbinger of what's to come, because the things that are coming together into work tech are not, kind of coming together in what might be a traditional, kind of consolidation path.
Yeah.
And so what was the story with ClickUp? How much did they?
400 million.
400 million Series C.
Yeah.
And, what I found really interesting is that the feature set, the product set is, I mean, we see it, kind of happening in different ways, but this is kind of one of the first times where I've seen like all of these things be pulled together and funded in such a significant way that it almost portends a shifting of categorization in work systems. So ClickUp has, performance management, basically. They have tasks, they have goals, they've got all the stuff that, kind of goes into performance management. They also have project management. Mm-hmm. And so, basically where the work is being done is also where, the performance around that work is being measured.
Yeah.
And then they also have learning components and communication components and coaching and, like just all the stuff brought together. So I was looking at their pricing page and, like for, like the smallest version of what they have, it's $5 per employee per month. Mm-hmm. And that has all of the, kind of team functionality. It has goals. It has project management. It has resource management, reporting, like all the stuff like Gantt charts and stuff like that that are much more significant on the project management side than they would be on like the performance management side, but they're all put together. And then you just kind of keep going up their pricing chain. It goes to $9 and you get to add like Google, SSO and, unlimited teams and time tracking and workload management, advanced workload management, timelines and mind maps and goal folders. Mm-hmm. And then, you keep going and, you're up to $19 per employee per month. And then you've got like team sharing and subtasks and multiple lists, and custom role creation, custom permissions, custom capacity and workload, increased automations and API, personalized admin training, and priority support. And they will also white label it. They'll provide advanced permissions. There's an enterprise API.
Wow.
I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And when you look at how that pricing structure is, $19 per employee per month, that's a lot.
Yeah.
You might expect, like a performance management, combined with, engagement measurement, combined with this or that or whatever to go, $4 to $8 or something like that. And these guys are pulling from so many different categories that they're able to get that PEPM.
Well, and I think that there's a couple of really, I think, interesting points here. Number one is a dynamic that we've seen happen, for the last few years. This even goes before the pandemic. Is in the average enterprise, there's something like 175 different cloud solutions, and that's sometimes on the small side. There's definitely a move on the part of the CFO and the COO to consolidate. And when you think about, great, how much am I paying PEPM for 175 different cloud solutions? And, where you see a brand like a ClickUp come in is the solution set that they're aggregating is actually much more relevant to all manner of workforces than, say, sort of the traditional talent management approach or the traditional HCM product platform. And I think that, my read on when you look at a brand like that getting $400 million, the opportunity is because we're in this kind of, I think, great reshuffling of leadership brands. Mm-hmm. We could look up in 10 years and ClickUp is the dominant brand in workplace technology. And I don't have any insight into what they're planning or anything like that. But those are the kind of market dynamics that we're dealing with now.
Well, I tell people all the time, Salesforce was founded in, like 1999. Mm-hmm. And, 15 years later, they had the tallest skyscraper in San Francisco. Yeah. That's a blink of an eye. Yeah. And so, there's probably going to be, a ClickUp, skyscraper that's 2 stories higher, 10 years from now.
Well, and it's just like another funding event last week that was really interesting was a brand, I think it's out of Minneapolis, that has a communications app for the deskless workforce called When I Work. They got $200 million. They had been around for over a decade. They'd been mainly a bootstrapped company. But when you think about how, deskless workers really don't have technology solutions focused on them at all, it's a really untapped opportunity. I'm not surprised that, there are investors out there who say, hey, let's make a big bet on this space. And the same dynamics. It's just like you can go from having a brand no one's ever heard of to having a leader brand if it's got the weight of investment behind it.
Yeah, that When I Work thing is really interesting because I'm sure you've found the same to be true. But when I've, in the last 2 or 3 years, they've been on every workup that I've done.
Yeah.
But they don't look on paper like like an acquisition target or a big funding target because they just don't have that, kind of, 100%, year over year growth or, whatever. They just kind of look like a bootstrapped, kind of company. And, clearly there's so much value there, but, that value is also mingled with people looking deeper into the industry to find where the opportunities are to surface technology. I think a Ready App, for instance, App, another great organization, another great product focused on the deskless worker. Doesn't have a huge brand, footprint out there in the world. But when stuff like that happens, it always, causes the question for me, okay, how long before people start finding the Ready Apps out there because there's so many really good companies that didn't follow that kind of traditional, hey, let's start with, $1 million seed and then a, $2, $3, $4, $5 million Series A or 65 million or whatever, then, et cetera. And there's a bunch of them out there.
Well, and I think that, and then this is something that we've also been talking about is just how rapidly the entire workplace technology universe is expanding. It's just like you go back 5 years and we felt like we had a pretty good handle on everything that was going on. We probably knew 80% of all of the brands, but now it is growing and expanding so rapidly that it's just like, I don't feel like I have the encyclopedic knowledge or grasp of what's going on just because everything is happening so quickly and work tech is becoming, spreading out into fintech and other areas just so rapidly.
Yeah. And you can't do it. You can't stay on top of it the way that you used to.
Yeah.
It used to be that, if you met with a few companies in a segment, then that would point you to more companies in a similar segment, et cetera, et cetera. And then you could combine that with a little bit of research and get a pretty good bottom-up read of, all the companies in a category. But now there's so much overlap between categories and so much money flowing into work tech and so many new startups that you literally have to be researching all day, every day, multiple people, teams just focused on, kind of doing workups on different vendors as they enter market.
Yeah. And I think, I was working on this earlier in the week, just kind of looking at the 3-year trajectory of work tech financing. And just, not only, how much money's coming into the space. So 2019, is 7.2 million. This year so far through last week, we're at 24.4 billion. So it's just we're probably going to quadruple the 2019 numbers.
Yeah.
The average deal value in 2019, average deal value was 26 million. This year, it's almost 50 million. It's 49.8. Volume of deals, 2019, we tracked 271 deals. In 2020, so far, 490 deals. And then this is the one that really jumped out at me. 2019, there were 19 $100 million plus deals. So far this year, 81.
Holy cow.
This quarter so far, we're barely a month into it, 15 deals. Q3 25 deals, Q2 23 deals. So it's just I think that what we've been seeing is just kind of a rapid acceleration, especially when you get into the later quarters of the year. And I think that this is easily going to be the biggest quarter in the history of work tech if it keeps on this trajectory. And what does that mean for next year? Is the train going to slow down?
Yeah, I don't think it is. I mean, I don't think it is, because I still am talking to too many people who have too much money that they have to invest.
Yeah.
You know, and the biggest thing on the demand side when it comes to deals is deal flow.
Yeah.
It's like people want deal flow, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to get deal flow when you at the same time have all this money that you have to invest. And so I don't think it's going to slow down. I think I think the types of deals are going to change a little bit, and I think that there's probably going to be some changes to the kind of requirements that people use as like their baseline to put their thesis together, and what kind of companies they'll talk to and what kind of companies they won't, because that money has to go somewhere. One of the good things that I hope comes out of all of this is that historically, as the pace of investment in work tech has increased, I believe that there's been a lot of value destruction because of the way that companies are evaluated to invest in. And there's been a lot of, kind of bias towards, like Silicon Valley startups or, companies who come out of these famous accelerator programs or whatever. Meanwhile, there's all these great companies, across the Midwest and all these, European countries and, South America, all around the world, who just don't get the same looks that, folks who, kind of come up the right way, in tech get. So, hopefully we're going to see more innovation, because there's going to be money invested in, companies who just have a different perspective, who build solutions for, different workforce populations with different goals, et cetera. So, I think a lot of good's going to come out of it.
Yeah, and I think we're already seeing that. We're seeing all of these great, rapidly growing work tech brands coming out of Europe. India is the same way, and growing really big, really fast, that are serving very diverse needs than what you would get, like a Bay Area company. Latin America is turning into a really great work tech ecosystem. Yeah. And so that differing perspective as those companies come into the North American market is, I think it's going to change the perspective that brands that come up out of sort of the traditional work tech cities and ecosystems like, New York, Silicon Valley, the way they develop their own technology. And it's gonna raise the stakes. It's just things are becoming more competitive.
Yeah, they really are. Well, one more topic before we wrap up, because it's just the thing that, I've been thinking about so much for such a, focused period of time over the last several months, is all this tech that's coming onto the scene, and what's happening in work tech markets, and what's happening with all these different solutions and categories being developed and platform levels being developed and all that stuff. There seems to be still, and I'm just talking about knowledge workers right now. I'm not talking about I'm very specifically focused on knowledge workers for this part of the conversation. But there still doesn't seem to be a broad understanding of the role of autonomy and the role of deep work and deep collaboration in knowledge work. And so just to break that down, Drucker was one of the first people who basically, came to the table with this notion that knowledge workers need autonomy. Like unlike, industrial workers during, that whole period of the, Industrial Revolution, all that stuff, where you could give them a very prescribed set of tasks, and those tasks could be managed, et cetera. Knowledge workers, they basically, when they're doing the work, they have to be doing it autonomously. You can't, manage someone to write great copy, or you can't manage someone to, produce beautiful art, or, create great analysis or whatever. So there has to be autonomy within the work. but the workflow is separate from the work, right? And the workflow has to, create an environment where people can, start and finish work without interruption. I believe that flow of work is one of the most important, kind of innovations that's driving work tech right now. But I'm concerned about the increasing number of distractions that are being thrown off from multiple communications channels, multiple applications. It seems like the noise is going up a lot, and that's actually squeezing productivity because the autonomy and time that's required to get into a deep work state or to have deep collaboration with colleagues is kind of under attack. Do you see that? Do you see any of, do you see any movement towards people acknowledging and recognizing this as the, tech stack becomes more complex and communication channels become more varied?
No, I don't see any recognition of that, and it's a huge problem, and I think some of it too is sort of generational differences. And I hate to bring that up because I think bringing up generational differences is lame, but I just did.
Are you saying that because I brought up generational differences earlier and then I didn't close the loop?
No. That was just an ancillary benefit. No, I mean, it's just like, I have no problem turning off all of my notifications. I've deleted so many things off of my mobile phone, deleted out of my browser because I just don't want the fucking interruptions. But I know that a lot of our younger employees, I mean, it's very much just how they engage with the world. They want those immediate notifications, but when you're getting, notifications from your social networks, from your work stack, from your emails, from your instant messenger, it's just like, if it's dinging every, 5 seconds, it's impossible to get work done. And so I think it's an issue that is a huge one and hasn't really been addressed. And I think it's a big driver of stress and an obstacle for productivity. One additional thing that I think is coming up in the entire conversation, whether we're talking about the metaverse or what's the work tech stack look like, is the need for asynchronous work. And I think that we're starting to see that come up a lot more often. It's just like people need to be able to choose when they work and what works best for them. I mean, like we know, from our own workforce, if you're a young mom, you don't get to choose when your kid gets an earache or when they need to go to the doctor sometimes. And it's just like, if you need to put things on hold from 10 to 1 so you can take care of that, how do you make sure that you're still a part of the workflow? And I think that, a lot of what we're beginning to see within a lot of work tech solutions is addressing that point, is how do you allow people to be productive when it fits better with their schedule and their life?
Yeah. And so, to me, this are you familiar with in game theory, the tragedy of the commons?
I'm not.
Does that ring a bell?
No, it sounds like a sequel to Game of Thrones.
It does, the tragedy of the commons. Well, and we should end on this point because we could talk about this for probably 2 hours. But the tragedy of the commons is it's a game theory proposition which is based on common grazing land, and it's like in everyone's individual best interest to graze their sheep as much as possible, and at the same time, it's not in the best interest of the common grazing land to be overgrazed, right? And so the question is, how does the balance of, kind of individual, advantage, meet, kind of the beneficial stewardship of a shared resource, right? And so the reason why I think this is relevant is because I think you can run into a tragedy of the common situation with asynchronous communications and with asynchronous work, because a lot of people are going to feel like their social capital decreases if they are not as responsive or as engaged.
Yes.
Or perceived to be as responsive or as engaged. And so it's basically, they're going to utilize asynchronous communication in a way that throws off a lot of other, kind of interruptive work for people.
Yep.
And that makes the ecosystem fall out of balance around, kind of the total workload, because suddenly you're doing a lot of, work about the work when you're trying to like synchronize all of these asynchronous schedules and communications and stuff like that. And so it's I think it's a philosophical and org design and communications design issue that we've not really scratched the surface on in terms of how you balance the need for autonomy and, asynchronous, kind of work situations with communication overload, with what Cal Newport would, call attention capital. It's like, where are we spending our attention, and, how can we protect it to get work done? And sometimes asynchronous, kind of communications and, works against that. But also, last, thing, one of the, kind of really tough things about this issue is that, you had mentioned earlier about, basically how you turn off notifications, how you are able to kind of manage interruptions in the work that you do. A lot of the theory that is kind of focused on this, how you create space for deep work and deep communications, actually points to the fact that behavioral economics work against self-governance and self-moderation in doing those things, because in your case, for instance, it could be argued that you feel more comfortable doing that because of your perceived status inside the organization.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Other people may feel that puts their job at risk if they are not constantly on and, kind of responding to, chat and to Slack and to email and stuff like that.
Right.
And so there's an equity component there as well, which is very difficult to, measure, think about, et cetera, from all of those multiple perspectives. The reason I brought up the generation thing for data specifically is because, I've read and have heard over and over and over again that younger generations don't care as much about sharing data and how their data is used as older generations. I don't know if that's total bullshit because in, like conversations that I have, I've met some very, young people who care a lot about how their data is used. And so like everything else, it's, probably, a spectrum. And the generational stuff, is not as significant. But I think that there is, like an equity component and an inclusion component that is driven by the perception of status and hierarchy in a lot of organizations, where certain things that, executives do to, block their days and, how they handle their communications are not tools that, a line worker feels comfortable, utilizing. So brave new world, lots of stuff to figure out. So we've got our work cut out for us for the next 20 years or so.
It's job security.
Job security. All right, man. Anything interesting going on this weekend?
This weekend, no, not really. Going to go see some live jazz, so that's going to be fun. Going to try to build in some barbecue time. I'm really fascinated with just like the New Texas Monthly top barbecue place list.
Goldie.
Yeah, there's like two, right around where the office is in Fort Worth, or one right down the street on the top 10 list. So I'm feeling some FOMO not being in Texas and able to sample that. But I'm bringing this back to brand. There was a professor at Louisiana Tech, 10 or 15 years ago, who was doing some research around barbecue restaurants in the South. And he had this theory that you could judge how good the barbecue was at a restaurant by how anthropomorphic the pig was on the sign. And don't even get me started on cow barbecue versus pig barbecue, but it's just like, if you're driving down the road and it's just like, oh, it's just a pig barbecue, all right. But, you're driving down the road and it says barbecue and there's a pig wearing a chef's hat and an apron holding a knife. That's probably some pretty fucking good barbecue. And so, there's all kinds of, brand matters, Brett. You may not know this, but brand matters.
Well, the farmers and the ranchers can be friends.
Yeah, I think so.
Oklahoma reference.
I know.
don't know. Sorry, show tunes.
That's okay.
I'm going to cut that part out.
That's okay.
Not the pig part, what I said.
Okay. That's fine. We'll fix it in post.
Yeah, fix it.
What about you? What are you doing this weekend?
I'm going to a wedding, a small wedding I'm really looking forward to, and spend some time with the kids. I was gone for a few days this week, and I missed my kid time. So I'm going to throw the old football around and, I don't know, find some dad stuff to do.
All right. Rake some leaves, too.
Yeah, I can't rake leaves.
And how are you supposed to go jump in the leaves like Linus in...
To have leaves, little known fact, you have to have trees.
Oh, okay.
If you have no trees, you have no leaves. So I have no leaves. I've got one tree in my whole yard, and it's in the backyard, and it does not drop very many leaves.
Well, to paraphrase Jay-Z, if you don't have trees, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but trees ain't one.
Trees ain't one. All right, man. Well, enjoy your weekend. Good talking to you as always, and I'll see you next week.
All right. Take care, my friend.